I just want to say I am so excited for you to watch or listen to this episode with Danielle Desir Corbett. Oh my gosh, she is such an inspiration. And also just to tell you what an amazing person she is, when we got done with the call, she was just totally gassing me up. And I'm just like, that's so cool to hear that you think that way about any of my content because I feel like you're amazing. So she's just a great person and she does so much work. She's had this amazing association where she's helped podcasters, women of color, to be able to amplify their message and get their podcast across. So she's doing such amazing work. I love everything she's doing. Her Thought Card podcast for travelers is also an amazing one to listen to. She has another podcast coming out specifically about road trips across the US and Canada. So that'll be a really good one to listen and watch out for. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you to watch and listen to this interview. I'm so excited for you to start applying for grants. So if you happen to be at your computer, definitely open up a new tab and go to grantsforcreators.com so that way you can kind of search through and get an idea of what she's talking about while she's talking about it. I think that'll be really great. And if nothing else, I would say definitely sign up for that membership if it's in your budget right now. Although honestly, it's really affordable. I think I pay like $60 a year for it. I think you could even do monthly if you want. And if you are watching and listening to this in real time, she has a couple of workshops coming up in mid-March. So I'll be sure to have all that information down in the video description if you're watching on YouTube and in the episode description if you're listening in. By the way, if you're new to this podcast, Social Media Magic, we talk about social media strategy, marketing, and all these other kinds of tips for getting more sales and growing your email list using social media. And we're specifically a podcast for anyone with an online shop, maybe on your own website, or if you have a store on a marketplace like Teachers Pay Teachers, Etsy, or if you sell on Amazon KDP, you are in the right place. So I want to give you that reassurance. I also want to hype you up and just say, I mean every single thing I say in this podcast. Like, you can absolutely be a thought leader. You can be an influencer if you want, and you could also build a business without being an influencer. But honestly, by being yourself, whether or not you put your face all over your content, whether or not you build a personal brand, you do have a strong message that's changing the world, and you have someone out there waiting to hear it. So I'm so excited for you. Listen to this episode. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our podcast in your favorite podcast player so that you never miss a new episode. Okay, let's dive into the conversation. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Social Media Magic podcast. My name is Brittany. If you haven't heard of me before, or even if you have heard of me before, my name is still Brittany. But welcome to the show. I'm a social media strategist, and I'm traveling all the time when I'm not doing social media work, which I think you guys know already. So I'm super excited to have Danielle on because, one, I feel like we have a lot in common, and I feel like you have a lot to learn from her. When it comes to business grants, I feel like she is the queen. She has an amazing membership called Grants for Creators, and I'm just so excited for you to learn everything she has to share about grants. So welcome to the show, Danielle.
Thank you so much for having me. I think also we have lots of travel in the content creation space. So I'm super excited. And one of my favorite topics is money, and it looks different. It could be travel money. It could be money for businesses. So I'm just excited to be here. Thank you again.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. When I first started creating content back in 2018, which makes me feel like a dinosaur in the online space, it feels like so long ago, I was talking about that. I was talking about ways to travel for free without credit cards, right? Because I knew a lot of people who were trying to not go into credit card debt and stuff. So I actually met Danielle at FinCon, which is a conference for financial creators. And so I just think it's cool that she's here because it also shows that if you have multiple passions and expertise, you don't even just have to pick one thing, which of course I love. So let's talk grants though. Okay, so I had an episode where I was talking about 5 free ways to get help for your business. And I talked about grants, and I barely mentioned it, but that was the thing that people were most interested in because I have an audience of teachers who have turned business owners or teachers with side hustles. They're very familiar with grants in the education space, right? They apply for a grant for their classroom. They go on Donors Choose to get a field trip for their kids. They're really used to that. So when I said you can use it for business, they were like, what? I thought that was only for nonprofits and schools. So first, let's break that down. Exactly what is a business grant and how does someone even get them for your business? Are they only nonprofits? How does that work?
Absolutely. So this is something that is quite common to think. It's one of the myths that we have is that grants are only for nonprofits. They're only for institutions like libraries and schools, which is not true. There is an entire other section of private grants that you can tap into, whether you have a great idea or you have an LLC. So that is so important. And just to give you context, last year, inside of my newsletter, I shared 638, actually in 2022, with 638 grants within my newsletter that I shared. 2023, I shared 1,048. So it's just more and more and more funding opportunities are available, whether you identify as an artist, whether you are a journalist, whether you are a social media strategist, a filmmaker, podcaster. There's so many different opportunities out there. I primarily like to say that there are 6 core ones. So you have micro grants, which are typically smaller, usually under 500. You have accelerators, which are typically cohort based, and you are working towards a goal or working towards learning together. You have fellowships, where, again, mentorships, maybe you have residencies where you can actually go off site and stay, and they give you a stipend and they take care of you, right? You have pitch competitions, you have contests. There are just so many types of grants out there that you have to really have an expansive mind and just be open to all possibilities. One of the things that creators and entrepreneurs struggle with is, well, the grant is interesting, but it doesn't say the word entrepreneur. It doesn't say the word podcaster. It doesn't say the exact word that we're looking for. And I always say, hey, let's look beyond that. And you are a small business. Even if you don't have a brick and mortar, even if you work from home, even if you work for yourself, you are a small business. That's one. And sometimes they're just grants who want to fund awesome ideas. So, for example, the Awesome Foundation, literally all you need is an awesome idea. So it just runs the gamut. They look so different. But again, you just have to have this idea that, okay, I am fundable. Let's now get that grant finding skill up so that I can find the opportunities that I could be a good fit for.
I love it you said, first of all, looking out for opportunities, possibilities, and having an expansive mind. That is so true. I think so many times in general, we pull ourselves out of the race before we've even applied. Like sometimes I've applied for things. I even think back to like as a student applying for grants and scholarships. And I in my mind, I did not have the luxury to wonder if I was going to get it. I was like, I need money. I'm just going to apply for everything, and I kind of treated it like a part-time job. And I think that really benefited me because maybe grants or scholarships where maybe there was someone more qualified, but they didn't apply. So I won it, right? So you just never know what's out there. And I think like just reading the description and thinking, how can I word this to that? Just like if you were applying for jobs, right? If you're applying for jobs, you're not going to put the same exact thing on every single application, right? You're going to tailor your cover letter, your resume to whatever you're applying to. I feel like it's the same thing with grants. And obviously Danielle has way more experience than this with me, but in case you're listening, she's nodding her head yes. So I feel like definitely
Yes.
like make sure that you're giving yourself the opportunity to opt into it. And I think like thinking creatively and what is the foundational organization about? Doing a little bit of research, right? What are they looking to fund? I know that I have a separate blog about living and teaching on a reservation. And so my grant strategy for that is a little different because I'm looking to like, what are some organizations who want to support Indigenous communities, right? Like I'm leveraging that to be able to fund other stuff I'd like to do to support the readers, right? So I think there's so much you can do if you get creative and also think about the things you actually need funding for. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that. So you mentioned the types of grants, which is awesome. What kind of things can it go to? Like, can you hire somebody? Is it for tools? How does that work?
Yes. So every grant is different. So it's really important to review the terms and conditions to see what's eligible and non eligible. But you can use grants for your marketing. So whether you need to hire a social media strategist, you could use grants for logo creation. You could use grants to actually offset the cost of operations. So staff and contractors to buy equipment like your camera and your subscriptions for Zoom, for example, or StreamYard. Anything that you use to support your work is fair game for the most part. And I like to think of it as like put down a list of all the things. Like I know I need a new laptop. And when I'm applying to the grant, I'm going to say, I need a new laptop. And here's what the laptop is going to help me to do, right? Here's the current issue and problem I have with the laptop. It's slow, it's from 2011, and I need to create content faster. I need to be able to serve and hop on videos. So think of what you need and make sure that's part of what you're saying in your application. A couple of things I also want to talk about is that you'll be surprised that in this private sector, when I say private, I'm talking about Fortune 500 companies all the way down to mom and pop shops who have grants that they're putting out there. Why do they want to do this? They want social goodwill. They want to say to their communities, hey, we're doing incredible work. We're funding a variety of creators and entrepreneurs and community leaders. So I know sometimes it's hard for us to believe like they're sharing money, like free money, quotes, free money, but it is true. There is something powerful about that seeding and feeding their community. So don't think of it as like this is weird or like they do really want to see you succeed. So I hope I answered that question. I kind of feel like I was kind of going a little bit all over the place, but yeah, you can literally fund whatever you need to get done. You can do. Again, every application is different. So just double check the terms and conditions. I've won grants where they're like, you cannot use the funds to hire any team members, contractors. But when I won the grant, I told them, hey, listen, I really need a new podcast cover art to promote this series. So can I do this? So I asked for permission and they said yes. So things happen at the back end where you can advocate for yourself and your project and you may be able to get that passed.
I love that. There's this idea of like, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? And I mean like that goes to everything like sales and marketing, grants and scholarships. And the worst thing is they'll say no, right? I mean, that's not really a big deal, right? So it's worth asking because if they say yes, then great. And if not, then it's okay. You still have that relationship for the future. Maybe there's another project you could collaborate with them on. There's so much you could say there. And I'll say that I worked in the nonprofit sector before I became a teacher. So, oh my gosh, way too long ago. And there was so much money. I mean, they were looking for ways to spend money, which is kind of like wild to think about. They're like, we have $10,000. What should we do with it? And I think for us as like individual creators, even as educators, that amount of money seems so unfathomable. But honestly, to a nonprofit or to a company that's looking, I mean, $10,000 is nothing to some of these companies, right? So they're looking for ways to get rid of it. They want to reduce their tax liability. They want to be able to support people and companies who are doing amazing work. So I think that the more that you can paint the picture. So getting your podcast cover art done, for example, what is the result of that? So you can have it so people find your podcast, sure, but what is the actual like vision, right? So you kind of have to paint a picture for them and think, what is the ultimate good that's going to happen from that podcast cover art? So, okay, podcast cover art, so more people find your podcast. Why does that matter? Well, I share these kinds of opportunities on my podcast and more people need to find out about them. Okay, what kind of opportunities? What's going to happen to these people's lives when they find the opportunities? So you kind of have to dig into that, like, excuse me, into that vision piece of like why you started what you're doing, what is the social good, what is the impact, and then paint the picture for them so they can see how they're related to that end outcome. Because if you just say, to have it for your podcast, they might not see, they're like, well, how does that benefit us, right? And so you kind of have to think, what do they want? And then how can I position my application to make it sound like what they want? Let's actually talk about applications, because I feel like once someone is on board, that's like the next thing that's going to trip people up, right? It's like, okay, well, what do I put on first off, where do I even find these grants? So actually maybe speak to that. But then once I found one, what do I even say on application? So actually back up, where do people find these grants and opportunities?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to finding grants, there's a couple of ways that I think is really helpful. One is tell your community that you are looking for funding opportunities. If you find any grants in this field or a small business or specifically for this type of market, let me know. And it's random, but your people will show up for you and they will send you opportunities. They'll tag you on social media. So definitely signal boost and let your people know. Social media, believe it or not, is a great place to also do some research. So instead of, mindlessly scrolling, let's set some time, maybe 10, 15 minutes, be intentional. And you are going to look at either some hashtags like grants, small business grants, like grants for artists, grants for writers. These can be either hashtags or just see what pops up from the search. Once you find a funder or you find an organization that's interesting, follow them and also subscribe to their newsletters. Newsletters are the best way to be able to now review grants and have them sent to you versus actually having to do the heavy lifting and the work. So for me, for example, I run this newsletter where that's all I do is find grants, and it takes dozens of hours. But for the average person who is like, I'm just, looking for a couple, just looking for more opportunities, start subscribing to newsletters, because that's the first place that they're going to send their announcements to. And honestly, it really works. So those are my two advices: is use social, ask your friends and family to be on the alert, and then subscribe to newsletters of whoever's funding these different projects, even if the grant is closed. The reason why I don't say Google is because Google has a lot of false traps. So you'll see a grant and you're like, this is exciting, and it's expired. Or this is exciting and it's an announcement of a winner. So you'll spend a lot of time wasted going through Google, although it's a great resource. Just again, go back to those three places. I think that would be a great place. And lastly, I'll say my newsletter, grantsforcreators.com. We literally, this is all that we do. Every month we share a newsletter that shares a variety of funding opportunities, typically 100 plus per month. And whether, again, you're a journalist, you're a writer, you're a photographer, anything creative, maker, we are looking out for you. And a lot of people have found it helpful to be able to save them time.
I know I personally love it. And I've just been curious. I don't even know if Substack is still doing the referral links. I was just curious to really see if people would be interested. And I was so happily surprised to see how many people were clicking on that link for your membership, which is so good, by the way. The amount of value, okay, the amount of value that you get from your newsletter really is amazing, because I've done that grind, right, of like searching all these different websites, and I actually do it for the teachers on the travel side, right? Like I send them like fun fellowships and things that are teachers travel specific. So I know how much work that is, and I mean the volume that you're putting out, I'm just like, she has to have help, because this is so much. There's so many of them, but it's really great because you really approach it from so many different angles too, right? So there's like identity-based scholarships and grants. Like there's so much out there. And I think that once you do kind of step back and think like, okay, well, who am I? And like, what do I qualify for? I mean, it's really great stuff. And by the way, those reflective questions, I think they're good for you to do anyway, for your branding, for your messaging. Who am I in this space? What makes me different, right? What sets me apart from everybody else? Those are questions you should be doing for your own marketing anyway. So it's like, they're good questions to do for grant and scholarship applications. Did you want to add something there? I couldn't tell if your mic
Yeah,
worked.
absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like there's a couple of things I wanted to share. So one of the creators in my community, they shared how they treat grant funding as an income source. So a lot of creators are looking at sponsorships, right? Working with brands. Behind the scenes, that's a lot of pitching, and that's a lot of like putting yourself out there. And creators are now starting to dedicate time to the grant side of things, because it's very similar skills. Like you have to make a case, you have to share your vision, you have to share what's in it for the funder, right? So I love that reframe, because sometimes it can be deflating when you're applying for things and you're not winning. And depending on what sector you're in, like the nonprofit, I believe it's like 1 in 7 grants get funded. For private sector, 1 in 10 grants get funded. But imagine if you were just pitching your business to someone, probably 1 in 10 people would say yes, right? So I love that creators are rethinking and reframing the fact that grants, while they are not predictable, they are an income stream that could have profound and huge impacts, rippling impacts on our business. So, like you mentioned, Brittany, don't count yourself out. Instead, count yourself in. So, I think that to me is very, very important, because a lot of times you're like, I don't have time. But like, these grants are like 2 questions, 2, 3 questions. And these questions are, tell me about yourself. Tell me about the impact you're having on your community. And what do you want to do with the money? And guess what? You can rinse and repeat. You can use tools and AI to help you. There's just so many things that could help us streamline. But if we're not putting ourselves out there, we can literally be missing out on being able to fund our dreams and our creative initiatives.
I think about that all the time. I think about like how many opportunities people could have if they would pursue that instead of other things. And I'm not the person that's going to tell you like, don't ever use social media for fun, don't ever watch TV, right? But I do think about it. Like there are times where I'm like, okay, I spent how many hours this week doing this? I could have been doing that. And so I will have seasons where in my head I'm saying it's a grind. But I know people don't like the word hustle and grind. I don't mind them because I'm willing to work hard for a little while. But sometimes you do have to decide like, okay, this is my priority. This is my goal. This is how much time and energy I'm going to commit to it. And I'm going to keep going until I get X result. I also think there's this idea of not taking it too personally, right? Like I know it's hard because you feel like you're burying your soul and you're putting it all out there, but I don't see anything as predictable, right? Anything can be taken away at any time. And I just think of it as someone says no, I'm like, okay, I got so many no's. So I'm just going to put that down as like, this is how many things I did today. I know that I'm doing my best and I'm going to see it as an opportunity to improve. Sometimes you can even reach out and be like, hey, I just want to know for future applications, what would you like to see? How can I improve? That little question too will also set you apart because most people don't think like, they think it's a no forever, right? It's just a no right now. Maybe someone else is better qualified, but maybe in the future you can apply again. So yeah, there's so much there about not counting yourself out. So with applications, that's another thing that really stresses people out. So say they get your membership, they love it, they're starting to track everything, they're getting really organized, but they're just stuck on like, okay, what do I actually say? And then like, what do I put on the application? What kind of stuff am I writing? And then tell me about yourself. I don't know. I don't have an interesting life, right? So what are some things that people could put on their application? What would be interesting to the people who are writing grants?
Yes. So I will clarify I'm not a grant writer by any means, but I have won several grants. And here are a couple of things that I do when it comes to my grant writing. So I really take a look at that page where they're sharing about the funding opportunity and I pull out words that speak to me and also speak to my community and what I'm building here. So don't be afraid to lift words on from the page. Go to their about page as well, of the funders about page, and see what their mission and vision is. And does your mission, vision, and values align? Don't be afraid to lift words. When I am thinking about applying for grants, I am thinking about, okay, especially if the grants are specific, let's say they're specific, they're like community oriented grants. I'm thinking about what is the impact that this project currently has or this project will have with funding. So I'm looking at the end result and I am backpedaling and thinking about, okay, what do I need and how do I share this with a total stranger who has no idea who we are? I also include things like facts and figures, any awards and accolades, anything that helps me to stand out. I think about also the results of this project on my community, the impact. All of these things kind of gets its own little section. I kind of just do like a brain dump first. Like I just do a bullet point list of like impact about me, my credentials. Do I have any awards, anything that's showcasing and noteworthy? And then I sit there and think about the crafting. And I think if we break things down into manageable chunks, it makes it easier. I think there's also a lot sometimes we get stressed out because we're like, this is professional document. Like, this is so important. And I love what you said, Brittany, about just like, we're just talking to someone, a stranger at a coffee shop about our project and our business, right? Like, what would you say to them? And if we keep it casual like that, you can always refine it on the back end if you decide to use AI tools. Like, I'm in love with Grammarly right now because literally you have a paragraph, you Grammarly it, and it's like, wow, you said that. If you're using tools like ChatGPT, you can literally put the request a proposal, like the application questions. You can ask, say, hey, this is the question. Here's my response. Improve it. It'll give you bullet point lists. You may have missed this. You may have missed that. So you can definitely, again, if you think AI is amazing, you could use it to your benefit. But it's always, to me, my non-grant writer mind is like, how can I communicate and tell a stranger what this project is about and why they should support it based off of what they're working on right now?
Totally. And I feel like that skill, like I was just talking about messaging, and I'm not sure if this podcast episode is going to come out before or after, but there was another episode around now that's about messaging from Katie Gable. So if you're listening, watching, be sure to listen to that one too, because it's all about knowing what your message is, like what those brand statements, those hills you're willing to die on, so to speak. And I feel like those will really set you apart, especially now, because nowadays there's so much noise. And I mean that in the best way. Like it's kind of amazing because these tools that we use every day, like websites and social media, have made it so accessible for people to start businesses online, which I love. I love that more people are doing that. But we also want to make sure that we're standing out, right? That what we have to say is different and unique, and also that it is truly authentic to us. I think a lot of times we can be tempted to accidentally imitate what other people are doing or saying or how they see the world. And it can be scary to make yourself stand out. I use this example on the other episode, but in case you're listening to this one first, I'll share it. So I just made a post the other day saying that I'm over the whole traveler versus tourist thing in the travel space. If you're in the travel space, you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a strong one. I was like, because I'm just over it. I'm like, I'm over making people feel bad because they want to travel a certain way. I'm like, I'm not here for that. And I could not believe, I should have known, but I could not believe how much engagement that post got out of everything else I put. And that's because I made a really strong statement. I put my flag in the sand, so to speak, and said, this is what I believe. And I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear it anymore. And so that, of course, there are people who are like, no, it's like, we need to be travelers. I'm like, yeah, pro tourists, whatever. Right. So it started discussion. And it was a good post just strategically because it got people talking and thinking. So that's what you want to do anytime you're applying anything, right? Whether you're, trying to get a new client or you're trying to get more customers, your email newsletters, like the stronger you can make what you believe and the more clearly you can communicate that, it's just gonna be better for you. So this is just a really good practice. Like, yes, applying for grant stuff's amazing too. Obviously, I want you guys to know about that, but just the act and the art and the science of crafting your message is such a good thing. So I'm so glad that you're here to talk about it. I know you have a hard stop in like 2 minutes. So Danielle, where can people go find you, learn more about you?
Absolutely. So I encourage you to check out our newsletter, grantsforcreators.com. We will send you a monthly newsletter sharing the funding opportunities that we found for the month. And we're typically a month ahead. So we're going to be sending out the next month. So you have more time to work on your submissions. If you are a traveler and you enjoy financially savvy, affordable luxury travel, as I do, I encourage you to check out my personal podcast called The Thought Card. And we have a website as well, thoughtcard.com. So great places to connect with me. And let me know what you loved about this episode, because Brittany, you are giving us a lot of great tidbits and just relighting my fire to get myself out there and continue to submit all those grants. I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. And you have too. Like every time I see your email, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to sit down and do that. So it's a good reminder for me too. Thank you so much for coming on, Danielle.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.